So here is your screencast for our review lesson to get all prepared for the Unit 1 celebration. And so leading up to this, you have completed the 3 cores assignments that were assigned for this unit. And just again, with standards-based grading, the way it works in this class is you do have a mean of those first 3 cores that's already in your grade book. So that's what you see. And if you click on the grade, you'll see any comments or what have you. Just a reminder that the core assignments are the only thing that can be remediated, and that's due the morning of the celebration. So if you're hoping to really help out your grade, I would take advantage of those. Just a few things that I saw that are typical in the core 1.3 with the mock research design. Your operational definitions absolutely have to have a number in them. You can't just say, for instance, how long they are stubborn. You can't just say how long. Like, you get to make up how long. Well, it's going to take 5 minutes. And what does it look like? Stubborn means your arms are folded and you refuse to agree for 5 minutes. That is a correct operational definition. And I know that this is always a little scary because there's so many possibilities and you're trying to find what you might deem as the right answer. And so you have to create this. You have to think of it. Confounding variables must be the outside influences on the dependent variable. And so how are you going to deal with them? Well, you can either specifically address the control of whatever you said was the confounding variable, but you can also say, well, I'm just going to use a really large sample in my experiment, and that way all the extremes will balance out. Experimental and control groups, again, just go back, look at your definitions. They're almost like formulas here. So experimental groups get the independent variable. So you've got to look back at your hypothesis and make sure that you know what the independent variable is. Sometimes I'm seeing people say, like, the experimental group gets the independent variable and the control group gets the dependent variable. Nope, they both are related to the independent variable. So there's always a way to self-check by looking at your hypothesis. Is the hypothesis correct? That's the last thing you had to really think about. And that's, again, takes some doing because this is a mock research design rather than something we're actually going to do. But you have to look at the groups themselves, the experimental and the control group. Is there a big enough difference in either the average, which is the mean, or the median, or the mode that you can say, yes, this difference is significant enough that the independent variable caused the change. In order to avoid confirmation bias, you needed to tell me something about looking at both sides. So if I think with my research that freshmen are more stubborn than seniors, okay? To avoid confirmation bias, I have to make sure that I am looking to see that I'm looking at both seniors and freshmen to see the level of stubbornness, not just only looking at freshmen going, yep, they're the most stubborn. And if you had a late or missing core, no release day. So please make sure that you are staying on top of things, coming to RTI, all of that good stuff. Okay, so again, remediation is only on the core assignments. And you've got to make sure that you email me when you've got those done, because all I get is this little signal, one resubmitted assignment. It doesn't tell me whose assignment it is. And as much as I love all of you, I'm not going to go back and look through. I just don't have the time in my day to do that. So do make sure. Now, you can make corrections to help you learn, but corrections are not going to give you the remediation points, okay? Use the feedback that I've given you and then go to that folder in Schoology, and there'll be a folder like this for every single unit. It's always the bottom folder, and you can find where the remediation is. So do it, and then make sure you email me when it's done. And these are due the morning of the celebration, the morning of the test day, because again, the whole purpose is to help you have practice to do well on the exam. Okay, so speaking of the exam, the celebration, all the tests for this class will be set up in the same way. There will be two parts to it. And when you come in on a test day, the desk will be in rows. So I encourage you to sit close to where you normally do. But so there'll always be, like I said, two parts, two separate scores. The first part are the objective questions. They're always going to be a mix of true, false, multiple choice, and matching. Okay. So for this particular case, we will start off with true, false. And I always like to say that true, false is picky and tricky, not trying to intentionally fool anyone, but you do have to know the specific ideas. And so you've got to know that vocabulary. Also, I'm sure you're kind of used to this. If the statement is false, you will need to change the word or words to make it true. And I'll remind you of that. Also, it'll say this right on the test. You cannot simply add the word not in to make it a proper change. So good try. But so here's an example. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. I hope you know that that is true by now. Let's say if I had phrenology instead of psychology, all you'd have to do is change that word. So make sure you're aware. Okay, matching. There's actually, with matching, you will need to write the letter of the concept in the line. Don't just circle it. Again, I'll remind you of this when you take this, and not all concepts will be used. In this particular test, here are the three matching sections. And I'm always going to tell you what they are because this is like a word bank for you. So you'll have one matching section over perspectives, and if you want to review those, not only do you have the lesson on Schoology, but you can go back and you can look at core number 1.1, and you have that. There's going to be one matching section over research methods. Again, you've practiced this. You can go back and redo those practices. And then finally, the types of psychologists, the careers, which again, you've practiced. You might need more practice. Can we tell the difference between, say, a clinical and a counseling psychologist or a school and an educational psychologist? So make sure that you're going back and reviewing those specifics. Multiple choice. There's no multiple choice on this particular test, but I like to give you an example because you will be seeing it in the future. And so this is what an application multiple choice question might look like. Which perspective would say that I experience road rage because I've been rewarded for other aggressive actions? And then you'll have your options there. Okay, so use your good test taking skills. If I were you and I'm taking this test, I'm going to underline the word perspective. I'm going to underline road rage, rewarded, and actions, because those are the key words I want to focus on. And then by using those, I can figure out which perspective. I've got to know the key parts of the perspectives. So that's what the thinking process I would like you to go through. Okay, so all section A's of the test will be out of 20 points, and you will always have this as a rubric for how you do. Yes, you've got to have them all perfect to be a level 4. You can miss 1 for a level 3.5. You can miss 2 for a level 3. Folks, level 3 is still an A. You don't have to be perfect. You do have to be prepared. And that's the big thing. And notice if you don't score 12 out of 20 correct, you will be called in for RTI. And we're just going to do a little reteaching. And then you will take a different assessment and see if you can earn up to that level 1. Okay. Second part, part B, will always be one essay related to the unit standard, and we will be practicing. We'll have a practice essay to get you ready for that. So for each essay, here's your practice. Sorry, here's your practice, but there'll always be like a little scenario, and then there'll be bullet points, and you'll have to address each of the bullet points. So explain how each bulleted idea, there's one example, contributes to psychology being a science. That's your standard for this unit. Everything has related back to that. Sometimes we specifically say, like if we're looking at the definition, well, the definition tells us that psychology is a science. Other times we've looked at like the 4 goals. And we've said, okay, the 4 goals give us the same procedure, no matter what we're studying. That takes away opinion. That makes it more scientific. So those are the things that I'm looking for. So for each bulleted point, like nature, nurture, you will come up with an overall statement. Nature and nurture help psychology to be a science because... well, maybe I'm going to relate that back to the 4 goals because it lets us know how much of our behavior is from genetics and how much is from the environment. And we can change our environment, so therefore we can change the behavior. So that would be kind of like a summary statement. And then you've got to make sure that you give me some ideas that support that. Okay. So like maybe you could take the idea of intelligence. Again, you made a child prodigy in, was that core 1.2, I believe. And so I'd go back and I'd review what you wrote. I like the thinking process that you went through with that is what you need to do. And you do not need an introduction or a conclusion. This is just straightforward writing. You do need to write in complete sentences and in paragraphs. Please indent those paragraphs, or you can skip a line between paragraphs, but it can't just be one big blob. You've got to organize your thinking. As always, a really good rule of thumb for every bullet point, have a separate paragraph. Okay? And this, you can also use your good test taking skills if you need to look back at the first part of the test and like, oh gosh, I forget if I have to talk about perspectives. Oh, instead of trying to do that, remember everything, well, I'm going to look back to that matching section on perspectives, and that's going to help me out. Okay, I still have to apply them, but that's going to help me out. All parts of the test are required. You don't get to go to the essay and just go, oh no, I'm not doing this. Yes, you have to do this because even part B can be answered at a level 1 way. So even if you just give me definitions, again, you have to do the essay to the best of your ability. You are not allowed to skip it. You will be taking it over if you do, all right? So just making sure we're clear on that. Okay, so write in paragraphs. Again, this is the actual rubric that we'll be using. So you can see level 4. How does each of the bulleted areas actually make psychology a science? And do you have 2 examples to back that up? Okay. Level 3, I'm applying the different levels of psychology. That's still an A, or those different bulleted areas, excuse me, but I'm not quite distinguishing among them. So that's the difference between a level 4 and a level 3. Level 2, I'm not even applying, I'm just stating it. And then level 1, I'm really just defining it. And I'll just say, like it would be something like nature, nurture, which is genetics and environment, make psychology a science. Okay. That would be an example of a level 1 type answer. So Nature and nurture will not be on the test, but it is a good way to practice. So the differences between thinking skills, well, here we go. Here's another example to walk you. So level 4, if I'm justifying, I'm distinguishing concepts. By here again, I'm using nature and nurture. By studying the degree to which nature and nurture impact behavior like aggression, psychologists can blah, blah, blah. Where did I come up with the idea of aggression? I just pulled that out of my hat. Okay. I just picked a behavior because I know the definition of psychology and that it studies behavior. So I selected a behavior to do this with. A level 3, as I said earlier, simply applies but does not distinguish. So here's an example. Nurture relates to scientific study of behaviors like so that could be aggression again, because psychologists could change the environment by and look at the results. A level 2 answer, nature relates to the scientific study because it looks at genetic behavior and is scientific because it's a study. And level 1, nature is genetics and nurture is environment. So those are the difference with the thinking levels. I know I've gone over this pretty fast, but you do have this same PowerPoint in Schoology, so feel free to go back. And if you have any questions about what's the difference, please, please, please have a discussion with me. That's perfectly fine. So finally, getting ready for the test. Tests are not able to be remediated, which means you have to go and giving it your best try the first time around. Okay. And testing is something that you have throughout your life. Maybe we don't call it a test, but it's still something you'll have no matter what you do in life. So if you think of like realtors, realtors, they need to know the real estate laws. Okay. If they don't and they sell a house and they've not met the law, they're going to get in trouble. Okay. Don't want to fail that test. So they've got to know those laws. Baristas, they better know how to mix those drinks. If they don't, then again, they're going to lose their job. And what I'm told for people that work at like scooters is like there's certain, like you have a manual you have to know. Same thing, truck drivers, welders, scuba divers, servers, flight attendants. There's always something you need to know, whether it's menus, laws, speed limits, whatever. You have to know those things, and you don't just get to look them up. You have to learn them. And so what we're going to talk about each unit, I'm going to give you some study skills. And I'm hoping that this is something that, again, that you can use not only for this class and other classes, but outside in real life. So here's a couple. Current ways, I imagine when students here studying, a lot of times we just look at our notes and we look away and we hope we can remember it, but that only gets to short-term memory. We want this information into long-term memory. So for every unit, you will always be provided with a review sheet. And for this unit, it's pages 17 through 20 in your binder. And this is my recommendation to go, instead of just short term, to get it to be long term, okay? Look at the review pages and complete as much as you can with pencil. And again, these review pages are not just asking you for definitions. They are practicing applying. So again, everything is getting you ready for this. What you can't do with pencil, then, so they'll be left blank, you'll go back, you'll look in your notes, and then you'll see if you can answer those questions, but do it in pen, because that is a visual reminder of, okay, I wasn't as confident in that. And then if you get through all of that and there's still some you can't answer, please have a conversation with me. That's the best way to go about it. So this is kind of layering your learning. And like I said, no matter what you do in the future, there's always going to be things that you need to learn. And so let's just, instead of just thinking these as simply study techniques, think of these as life techniques. I know that's kind of cheesy, but still. The other idea I have for you, which is again one of a really, really good ideas and is so good for this course. Everything in this course relates to behavior. And so you're always behaving. You're always seeing people who are behaving. And so you can always talk about this with other people. Maybe you have a conversation with a sibling, and maybe there's some behavior they do that irritates you. And so you talk about it according, well, the psychoanalytic perspective would look at your borrowing my things without asking. And they would say it's because blah, 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 or whatever it might be. But use these in your own life, folks. Teach the idea to someone else, and it will be very, very helpful for you. So that's it. And make sure that you are actively preparing. I will ask that each of you go to the review folder. There is a form called the metacognition form that we will do, and you will start it today by answering the first 3 questions. What's the content that I'm comfortable in? What's the content I'm still confused by? And specifically, how am I going to study? Please don't just write study. I want to know what you're going to do to study specifically, where you're going to study, what time you're going to study. If you have that plan, it's much easier to stick with it. If you just think, oh, I'll do it later, sometimes later never arrives. So have a plan. Make sure you've completed all the core assessments and that you've remediated if you need to. Work on those review sheets, redo any of the practices. So many ways to help you get ready, including a Quizlet that I have here and the research review. So I know you're going to do great. You've got all the tools. Now you just have to use them.